Yes, so I'm going to present about the data strategy today. Ever since ChatGPT came out, a lot of people wanted to do something with data. A lot of new kind of companies want to do something with data, and they want to do a data strategy. But what even is that, and how can you go about it, is what we're going to talk about today. First, one thing that it is not is basically defining in your sort of company strategy that you want to be data-driven, and then close it there and move on with other topics. Especially since a lot of the clients that we're seeing now are just getting started. In strategy, you always want to do sort of a maturity model or something like that, so that you have something to show on the pretty slides you have to deliver at the end of the project. This is one of them. You usually go from one, that's kind of a low maturity. Most people work in Excel. Don't know if you're all in IT, you maybe not even know what that is. Compared to, let's say, this transform organization that a lot of people want to work on now, like AI and ML, is used on a daily basis. You use ChatGPT for all major decisions and so on. But a lot of the companies that we're seeing are really still on the very early stages. Even though when we look at the data map and all the hype that we're seeing, we feel like everybody's kind of in the business of doing, let's say, really cool data technology platforms with really cool governance models and so on. I'm focusing today maybe a bit more on the left side of this overview. Because, also just to mention, I mean, companies don't come to us when they don't have problems. They come to us when they have problems. We're working in the data industry, across the data value chain, and trying to kind of see if we can identify the potential for a new data strategy in the company. And this is me. I usually work in data strategy and governance, but also as a product owner. I have a bit of a different background than most people maybe in this industry as a mechanical engineer, so I'm always trying to be maybe a bit more tactical and not think about something that can happen 10 years from now, but maybe looking a bit more into the next 1 year. What can we deliver of value? So that was also a bit of the bias in the presentation today. Okay, so first, data strategy. What it is, for me at least, it's a guideline so that you can really look at an action and say, should we do that or not, based on the strategy, and not this, let's say, very sort of visionary statement of wanting to become data-driven or wanting to become AI-ready. I want to have some sort of concrete problem statement that you can have, and then kind of break down the concrete actions that we want to take to reach that objective into the classical 3 pillars, basically people, processes, and technology, and do that concretely by selecting use cases that we can then develop. Historically, you've seen a lot of data projects that started on the technology side. So first they set up the infrastructure, then they started to load in all the data sources, and only after that did they think about, okay, we also need to find some users here and figure out what they actually need to use that data for. What we are seeing now is that we're really trying to slice that, and I also brought an example on that, so you can quickly deliver something to the users, so they actually become data-driven. And in order to do that, I put in that between the vision of wanting to be data-driven and all the different steps and actions you can take within each dimension, you also need some sort of problem statement. You need to solve an issue here. And then there was one comment about AI. Is it just like a buzzword, or like, why are we even doing this? And in order to do that, I really like sort of these decision matrix. Should we do it or not, even if we believe or we don't believe in it in the future? And on one dimension, we have the internal control. Basically, should we or should we not? That's something we can decide as a company. And then on the other side, we have the external influence. Either AI really is the future, or AI is just a buzzword. And no matter what, at least based on this very, very basic management consulting decision matrix, it always would make sense to prepare for the future of AI, because not doing so, and AI is the future, would mean the death of your company. So that's how we convince people to make decisions as management consultants. Good. How do we then do that concretely? At least I think that it's a bit unrealistic to go from something where everything is in Excel and most employees do not trust the quality of the data and the data that they see in the dashboards, and then directly to a black box AI model. So we recommend, at least the clients that start here, to go kind of as an in-between step and make sure that they have sort of more like the quick wins or low-hanging fruits of making reliable data in dashboards before they jump and start to make really cool AI models. And even in order to do that step from, let's say, 1 to 3 on the maturity model, we see some challenges. I'm going to go back to them, I'll come back to them in in the examples that I brought. But of course, the first one is that they don't really have a strategy. Then there's the issue that we see a lot still in companies, that they have this idea that they want to go data first. So basically looking at, okay, so what kind of data do we have? How does it look like? Should we load it into a platform and have a bit of a better look, instead of looking at the people who are actually going to use that data in the end and see what they need and see how data can then become the solution to their problem. We also have, I'm actually not sure I would really say that one-to-one that we have a low literacy of the people, and more feeling that we have an assumption that people have a low data literacy. What we actually often see is that people don't have access to the data. They don't have access to do the analysis that they want to do, or see the dashboards that they want to. So I would rather combine that as kind of one impediment to reaching these, let's say, data-driven decisions. And then, of course, we also see a lot of legacy technology. So you can't really utilize the latest analytics trends and so on, because you just have an MS Access database somewhere with an SQL, with an Excel connection. And can't really get far. And then, of course, the last one that we always get the question of is the low data quality. I would say that that basically goes across all of the dimensions. On one hand, we have the people who are inputting the data into the systems that don't really get where is this data going to be used. So they don't really get the feedback loop of why it's important to have a good data input. We have also a process, the end-to-end process, from very, very high upstream with the data input to very low stream of putting the data into an analysis, and not really having any sort of checks and balances on the way there to make sure that we have a good quality. And then, of course, we also have the sort of digitalization level that we see, that basically a lot of the processes that people want to optimize with data or decide upon based on data, for instance, in forecasting, they're actually not digitalized. So that means you basically can't really pull in the data to analyze it, because a lot of things are happening offline. And then you cannot really make a prediction. So far, so good on, let's say, the frames and so on. I brought 2 concrete case studies to see kind of what we're seeing as trends in the industry right now. Since I'm a mechanical engineer, I brought 2 of them that are both in the manufacturing business. So it's not like a, what's it called, insurance company or something like that, where they're really looking into AI. I'm more looking at the companies that have been working for the last 100 years. They do have some data and so on, but it's mostly still in Excel that they're really analyzing it. So this is one company, 1,000 employees. Most of them are engineers, and they don't really have any central data team or platform, but they now had a top-down decision for management that they needed to be data-driven, and that was then pushed to each manager in the different departments that they needed to do something about that. And that's basically where they came to us and said, okay, what do we do? And also they said, we want to really involve our employees, but we actually do not think that our employees would be at all motivated to participate in anything that has to do with data. So there we basically focused on the top half of our strategy house, so on use cases and people. And first of all, we wanted to test this hypothesis. Does it really, are all these people really completely demotivated to be part of this this initiative? So we did sort of a kickoff with a teaser and saw that everybody showed up. That's usually a very good sign. Some had very critical questions. That's an even better sign. They were not just forced to be there and then didn't really care about being there or what the outcome was. And then we also did one-to-one interviews to really see, let's say, okay, what is actually the data competence of these people? Do they already have idea what they could do with data and so on? And kind of got a really positive response that we could then kind of bring back to our sponsor and say some of these assumptions actually don't matter or that it don't make sense, before we then went into the workshops where we then collected 60 people to kind of get new ideas for use cases. In general, for use cases, there are kind of 2 approaches. There's either the one to look at what are the current pain points in the organization and what is the current strategy, and then find sort of use cases in AI or outside of AI within that space. That's the one I find the most interesting, so that you don't have sort of an AI leg on the side of all of the things that you actually make money on. Or there's the one, of course, to try to find completely new ideas. I think this should be both, but usually in order to really get people interested in this, I think it's more interesting to first focus on the pain points that they have today, or the way that they want to go, instead of trying to do something completely on the side. Then we did like a gap analysis, classical recommendations to top management, and then got, let's say, the approval for the next step to get funding by top management, so that it always, let's say, there's always a phase for how it's going to continue after that. And then always kind of with the idea that we do like an iterative implementation instead of trying to build everything from scratch. And then they went to a workshop, and then only 2 years after would they see any kind of result from that workshop. That was case study number 1, so really top down. Then another example we have, it's not that strategic because it's not coming, let's say, on the C-level of the company, but it's coming from more a classical scenario where we have a AI, or let's say a data analytics department in a company, also engineering company, a bit more employees. And they basically had like a central data team of very few people working in an ad hoc way and a legacy data platform that just cost way too much money. They also didn't really have any data strategy. They also hadn't had any output from the company in the last 2 years. From the department in the last 2 years regarding data, because they had this very data-first approach where they wanted to sit down and really analyze the data and do a, what's it even called, a master data model for a few years before they could push something to production. So here we basically went in and said, you can't really start pushing you as being the new data hub. They had the vision to really become the central data hub of the company if you haven't delivered anything in 2 years. So let's maybe start small, not spend too much time, involve too many users on the first, let's say on the strategy and so on, but rather do like a small framework of where do you want to go, how should your strategy look like for the next year, and how is the target architecture. And then in order to gain trust, we went in and did a quick win. So that by replacing the legacy, let's say technology, that was also a way to have a good business case because it was really expensive and super cheap to replace. And then we started to have the issue, because I've also heard we should talk a little bit about the challenges. What we then wanted to do next was to really go big. We wanted to do the Lighthouse project. So that's really something where we say we do something that's a little bit hard to show how we're going to work, and then we can present at the end how we can work now on the new operating model, from everything from the technology that we've replaced, the processes that we've defined, with the people we want to involve in a strategic manner, with the biggest problem that the company had at the time, which was basically the supply chain. The issue was that what the client really wanted to do was to do an AI project. And if you know anything about AI, it's usually not the best option for a sort of short-term Lighthouse project that you want to deliver within 3 months, because a lot of things can go wrong. And the thing that went wrong with this one was the absolute classical one, the low data quality. And that was across all the 3 dimensions. The data was not available in technology because the process had not been digitalized. The ones that were following different processes and being definitely available. And the people were not used to making decisions based on data historically. So suddenly seeing an outcome from an AI model was kind of a hard process of saying, okay, now you need to trust this one, when you have never seen kind of the amounts that these kind of the predictions should make. So we're still working on that. I don't think it's really the Lighthouse project yet. But maybe I also heard that we have a lot of IT people in the room, and maybe that's kind of one ask for you, is to see if you can also help us a little bit on the larger degree on digitalization, maybe a little bit less customization so that the data can be used from our side. And then see if we can kind of close the feedback loop a little bit so that we can really get data that we can use on downstream, so to say. So, in summary, I'm still within time. Yes. One thing is really important, instead of looking technology and data first, we really recommend to look at the end users and involve them and solve their problems first with data. So really looking at problems where data can be the solution and not look at data as the goal in itself. We also really recommend to do kind of an iterative approach to reach an early return of investment. And then we want to really highlight that not everything can be solved with data and analytics, not even if it's called Gen AI or AI and so on. So, thank you very much.